What is up, Internet Basketball Junkies? Coach Hack here. I'm with Coach Lewis Shine, and tonight's show is all about building a defense that actually wins games. Coach Lewis Shine has coached at the college and professional levels, built one of the top defensive teams in the country, ranking top 10 nationally in multiple categories like turnovers forced and steals. In this live stream, we're not just talking concepts, we're building a complete defensive system from the ground up. We're going to cover things like defensive identity, defensive philosophy, how to teach pressure and force turnovers, the 1-2-2 press and how it disrupts offenses, film breakdown of Villanova's tempo press, why rebounding is a hidden key to great defense, some drills that build conditioning, toughness, and habits. If you want your team to defend with purpose, create chaos, control games, this one's for you. Coach Shine, thanks so much for coming on tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. This is definitely a pleasure. You know, we've been connected here for a little time now, so I definitely appreciate the connection and just very excited to, get on your platform to be able to talk a little bit about defense. I know just being connected with yourself, you're very knowledgeable with the game for sure as well. And so it's always great to get together with like minds, man, and really, chop it up and, hopefully be able to pass some knowledge on and to coaches that are looking for some more knowledge and those who are sharp in what they do, just to be able to add to what they do.
Yeah, I like offense, but I've definitely been a defensive guy, and my coaching style has always been the backbone of what I do is a strong half-court man-to-man defense. And I know you love some defense too, so I think this could get real interesting. But I'm interested in hearing a little bit about your background. I view you as a guy who's got your hands in a lot of things. You got a lot of things going on. You've accomplished a lot of things. You've coached at the college level. You've owned a pro team. You've worked in multiple roles. How do you think that's kind of shaped how you see things today?
Yeah, so for me, just having a lot of different, just honestly opportunities in the game of basketball. Coming up through college as a walk-on, played at Miami, Ohio. My alma mater did very well this year, so that's very exciting. But you know, um, it started with defense, and even at being a walk-on at Miami, the way I got on the court was defense, and so that kind of really started early for me. When I played a year of pro ball after I left college, the way I got on the court was defense because a lot of guys on my team, you had guys that played at LSU, Cal, Colorado State. Like there was some studs on my team, so like the scoring was like taken care of. But the way I got on the court was defense, was able to start a few games because of defense, I view defense, if you're able to score, that's one thing, but if you're able to take away the points that another team can score, that's very valuable too, especially in the eyes of a defensive coach. They'll really value that. And so being on the other side of the ball after playing ball, coaching at the pro level, coaching at college levels, I was able to see it from that side. I feel in a clearer, through a clearer picture because I was the player that had to make it playing defense, and so now being a coach, it's like I appreciate it a lot more. So I was able to bring a style and an angle to the game through my coaching that really, garnered a lot of success for the teams that I coached.
Yeah, in my coaching career, I've always felt like there's a consistency with players that can play defense. Defense travels. It's not relying on the ball going in or not. Some players that are kind of just offensive minded, they can have up big games and they can have down games. But defenders, there's a comfort in the consistency that they bring to a basketball team. And you played Division I. You played at Miami of Ohio. I believe you played with Wally Zerbiak. And if you played with Wally Zerbiak, I would bet that he had a lot of the offense covered, and they needed to find some defense to plug in next to him. Tell me about your experience playing at Miami, Ohio, and playing with Wally Zerbiak.
Yeah, listen, that was probably one of the most amazing years ever. Like back then, so this was 98, 99. I was a freshman then. And so, I had to walk on the team, and it's a long story with that. But, getting on that team, there were a lot of good players on that team. Of course, Wally, it was Wally World. So it was we used to call him World. So he did his thing. And so, back then when like ESPN was on your campus, that was a big deal. Like ESPN wasn't on like every campus like it is now, where you could just watch any game on ESPN. Like when they showed up, it was special. And so I can remember times they were on our campus. I remember times walking into practice and the whole court was set up for a photo shoot with Wally. That special episode, what do you call it, the magazine, the Sports Illustrated shoot, like all that stuff, man. It was just amazing. That year we were ranked in the country. We beat Tennessee, which is a top 25 team. Like it was bananas that year. And so just being able to like experience that, we won the MAC title that year. And then went to the Sweet 16 that year. So that was like a big deal to be a part of that. A lot of times in practice, being able to like guard Wally on switch offs and things like that. And just being able to see like his work ethic, and then he got drafted in the lottery that year. Like I was able to see that. And so it taught me a whole lot just about work ethic and the game. So, and then, let alone being able to be coached by Charlie Coles, which is a, Hall of Fame coach, amazing coach, like father figure. And to be able to be under his tutelage, like that was like really strong. And so I take all of those accounts and different situations into like coaching, and it helps to shape it.
Yeah, I bet you had tremendous pride in what Miami of Ohio accomplished this year, and it was probably pretty fun to see them as one of the kind of top storylines of the season. There was a lot of debate about their standing, and they've performed so well, and they were so fun to watch from the offensive side of the ball, running the Princeton stuff and the 5-out. That makes for a fun offensive game to watch. You at Central State, you built one of the top defensive teams in the country, and we're going to dive into one of your PDFs that has some of that philosophy in it. But when did you really realize that defense would become your thing?
Yeah, so before coaching, like I said, I had the opportunity to play a year of pro ball, and it just that's where it clicked for me, where I knew that, man, if I'm going to get on this court, I'm going to have to go shut somebody down.
Yeah.
And so it was my first start. I actually got to start the very first game of the season. And there was a guy that was pretty famous in the SEC that played on that team. And, we were both, first year pros, and I held him to 2 points. And so that was like my, I guess, claim to fame, and kind of like my coming out, like, hey, that helped me to see like this is where I can be valuable. And I saw what that was able to do to the opponent, because if you have a point guard, which I was a point guard, and you're able to take away the floor general on the other side, or disrupt that person from doing what they've spent time in scouting reports and film session trying to do, and you disrupt the point guard from getting the ball into the offense the proper way and things like that, you can really have an effect. And so that showed me. And so I never forgot that, even when I went into coaching, even at Central State, because that was my first time coaching in college. That by that time I had already had a year of being an assistant in the pros and a year of being a head coach in the pros. So after that is when I went into college, and I was able to bring some of those things and introduce some of the concepts that I learned by being a player.
And you've done some skill training. You've trained at kind of every level from youth to pros. From the defensive standpoint, what do you think all the great players that you'd worked with had in common as defensive traits?
Yeah, so I would say honestly that some of the players that I've coached, the defensive trait I would say first of all was they were willing to be a sponge and learn. That was probably the biggest thing. And I used to take a lot of my players, especially at Central, and a lot of our film sessions would start out watching clips like the famous clip where Kobe guarded Dwayne Wade full court.
Yeah.
Like we would start a film session out like that, and I would bring players in for breakdown sessions. So I would like bring two guards in, or I would bring like the fours in, and we would watch Dennis Rodman clips. So we would start it out before we would even go to watching the opponent's clips, because I wanted them to see greatness. I wanted them to see what was attainable and the type of level of a player that they could be. And so I was grateful just to have some players that were willing and ready to like listen in and really buy into my style of teaching. So I would say that's probably the top trait before you even get to anything on the court. They were willing to be a sponge and like listen to, or buy into some of the strategies that, I was really trying to push through.
Yeah, I'd like to get into some defensive tactics with you. My audience comes to kind of expect. We're going to talk schemes here. And one I wanted to touch on first was a guide that I have, which breaks down how I would implement a full defensive system. So we're taking a view here of full court concepts, three-quarter court concepts, half-court concepts, and quarter-court concepts, and how it kind of all fits together. So I'd like to talk through kind of this system that I've used in my coaching career, but I wanted to kind of talk to you about how you would build a defensive system. I know we're going to talk about a 1-2-2 press here coming up shortly, but what else would fit into you schematically, your style of coaching that would also be included in a full defensive system?
Well, and please tell me if I get off track on the question. I'm trying to really like listen to you and just make sure I can thoroughly answer. So my first thing in building a defensive system, I think it's the first you got to determine what your vision is for your defense. So for me, our thing was that we wanted to completely disrupt the offense and what they were trying to do.
Yep.
So if you come out with that goal, of course you got to define it, because that could be like a broad goal. You want to disrupt them, but now you have to define what style of defense does that fall under. So for me, it was full court, man to man, or 1-2-2. We were pressing like 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And so because that, and of course, during the course of the game, you may or may not get in the press at times or whatever, but if you look at 80% of the time, if you go back to some of the film on Synergy for Central State, we were full court 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And so because in that type of system, I expected that, then I had to like train my players to be able to do that. Like I couldn't be a coach that's like, oh, I'm expecting them to press full court, but I'm not preparing them. So now we go back and kind of reverse engineer it and say, okay, we're going full court press all game, pushing up on, fine passing lanes in the half court, all of those things. They have to be in the kind of condition to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so then, I was a certified strength and conditioning coach. I knew some of the things that we needed to do in the preseason when the end of August, early September began to start, and we were able to like get on the court and do like certain things. We put a lot of different things in to allow them to be able to last a full season doing that all game, every game. And so one of the things that we would do, we did a lot of on court. Well, let me back up. One of the things that would allow for that kind of system is I had to understand that you have to be able to train your players aerobically and anaerobically. So what that means is you got aerobic type of training, which would be like your distance, your anything that's involving your oxygen, like you're going to be able to breathe like really good, but you got your anaerobic where that's like without oxygen, less oxygen. So that's going to be more like your sprints, those kind of things, like 11s down and back in, whatever the case. And so we had to train both ways, because in the course of a basketball game, you have both of those type of things happening. You have your spurts in the game where it's like, man, last 3 minutes, like you're not going to be able to like take deep breaths like every moment. You're going to be like back and forth, turn, pivot, go, full court, run and jump, like trying to win that game. And so we had to do both types of training. So we would have like our sprint work and all that kind of stuff. We would have our distance running, our mile, all those kind of things. But we also did a lot of pool work, because what pool work did was, when you do pool work, it's probably the best type of workout that you could do with your basketball team,
Uh-huh.
because any direction that you move, there's resistance in every direction. So um, that was probably the most valuable workout that we did. So we would do things in the pool like defensive slides. We would do power jumps. We would do running in place, and like, a lot of intense interval type training in the pool. So like you do that in the pool and you get on the court, it's like easier, it's effortless to move. And so we would also do things like holding your breath type exercises, because like when you do certain things like that, and of course, consult with your athletic director and whoever, before you do this. But we were clear to be able to like do things like hold your breath underwater and do like 3 sets of fail. And so what that does is it increases your lung capacity, so that when you're on the court, that's going to help you when you're trying to build this defensive system. So I think that's, to answer your question, that's like the foundation before you even get into like on court concepts and all angles and all those kind of things.
Yeah, I think there was some brilliance in what you laid out there, which is for coaches to kind of start with the end in mind. And you had talked about, we want to create disruption, we want to create chaos, and the schemes that you would choose to bring that could change. But at the end of the day, you want to be causing chaos and causing disruption. And then physically, how do I put my players in a position to be able to execute the end result that we want to get? So just looking at this defensive system here a little bit, Coach, this would look like a lot to a lot of coaches, where someone might look at this and say, you had 9 different defenses in. Well, no, we really didn't have 9 different defenses in. It all kind of started with this half-court man-to-man offensive system that I called the Wolfpack, and it's more of a gap-based system. I would imagine in the half-court you were playing more of a denial-based system, where you were trying to take away passes and be a little bit more aggressive. Would that be correct?
Yes, that was our main goal, to cause turnovers.
Yeah, so I would start in kind of a gap-based system, and one of the issues with a gap-based system is you're really trying to outlast teams with that. You're trying to make sure shots are contested. You're staying in front of people. You're keeping good rebounding, positioning, but it's hard to take the ball away from people. It's not quite as hard to take the ball away from people when you're in a denial defense like you would be playing. So in order for us to start with a gap-based system, we had to have some ways to spice things up, which would be this scramble concept out of the half court, where we would run our base defense here, this wolf pack, but we would add different trapping concepts to it. So we might trap the first pass, or we might do some random trapping, or we might ball screen trap. And that allowed us to bring some pressure to a gap-based system when we wanted to, or when we needed to in a game. And then moving over in the half court, we've got a 1-3-1 half court trap. So that was always my favorite change of pace style of defense, where we could cause teams to confront a defense that's a little bit different in man-to-man, where they'd have to pass the ball around, they'd have to space a little bit differently. So, we've took a look at 3 of these boxes. It's really only two defenses, but we would also have an option to drop into a 2-3 zone. We would do some 2-2-1 pressing. We would do some diamond pressing. And then on a rare occasion, we might even do a combination defense down that's in this bottom left corner. But these top 2 are really just an extension of our man-to-man defensive principles rolled up the court into a full court setting, where we can either play straight or we could run and jump. So a system like this, Coach, I'd imagine yours would look a little bit different, but I'd imagine all the schemes that you choose, they would fall into one of these buckets. It might be a pressure deny defense right here. You probably have some trapping that you could do out of that. Your pressing would probably be in a 1-2-2 instead of a 1-2-1-1, pretty similar. But just thinking about your coaching career outside of a pressure defensive man-to-man system in the half court and your 1-2-2 press that you use, what other schemes might you have used that would fit into a defensive system like this, where you'd see all your schemes laid out?
Yeah, so of course we had the full, we had the full court man, the 1-2-2. We leaned towards the 1-2-2 because it was just very effective. Like the way we ran, I'm pretty sure we'll probably get into it today. But the way we structured it, it was honestly, I seen other people do it, but then you know how you can see other people do it and you come back and put kind of your own things in there
Uh-huh.
based on just your own experience. That's kind of what we did. So yeah, that would fit like in the full court. Once teams got across half court, like we had different schemes there, but it had the overall goal was to speed up their offense because you got the shot clock in college. So, speeding up the offense, that's where you really put pressure on the IQ of the other coach and what they've been teaching their players. Um, to combat that, if you have a team that's trying to speed you up, what you do in practice is you play on a short shot clock. So instead of, I think college is still 30, it was 30 when I was coaching, we might play on a 20 or 15-second shot clock. So that if we were put in that position at all, by a really highly, pressure type of defense, we could deal with it. And so we were trying to see what teams were doing. Like, were they capable of having their offense sped up? So we would do different things. We would throw different things at them. Of course, we had our man-to-man. A lot of times when we would go 1-2-2, we would drop back into a 3-2, and that proved to be very effective. So yeah, on your diagram, we would have a slot for our 3-2.
Yeah.
For our like half court, we would do half court 3-2. Sometimes on like misses, we would just drop back half court 3-2. Or we do like quarter court, just pick them up, 3-point line extended, so it just different points of the game. Of course, like a sideline out of bounds, you're not, your 3-point line extended. We would put our 3-2, like our three that were out, they're like standing on the 3-point line. And then a lot of times, of course, at the top, we would run our 4 at the top. So we had different schemes based on like personnel we would play. Like when we would play someone like Kentucky State, they had like their 3-point shootings was really good. So our goal, like one of the games we played, was to take that away. So we had our length up top and we were standing on the 3-point line. So it was able to take some of that away. Percentage wise, they didn't get that many attempts. So we were able to, be successful in those kind of things. But like your diagram here, we had different things and different calls based on, maybe our personnel that we were, playing and guarding against.
Yeah, I want to just scan through this document a little bit. This is available for anybody that's watching. This is one that I give away with kind of link in bio or something like that. But it's kind of a teaser of all these different defenses that I've used in my defensive system. And one of the things that I'm into with defense is I like having contrasting concepts where I have my gap-based system, but also ways to get more aggressive with it. To me, it kind of sounds like your philosophy is the opposite of that, which is okay. You like to have complementary styles of defense that all kind of funnels into the same style of what you're looking for from the end result of your defense. Do I have that correct, Coach?
Yeah, it's definitely. It's if I'm understanding what you're saying, a lot of are you saying like a lot of the styles, like even like full court, it kind of translates into like half court? It's very similar.
Yeah. It's like my example would be, if you're facing a team that is handling your pressure defensive system, you're probably going to give them a little bit more pressure in probably a different way, as opposed to like relaxing your defense into like a 2-3 zone or sitting back. You're always wanting your kids to stay aggressive and stay in that mindset, as opposed to having more tools at your disposal that might limit some of your exposure with how aggressive your defense is becoming.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely agree with what you're saying. Like, yeah, we came to bring the pressure.
Yeah.
So we were not going to let you off the hook, maybe because you beat our press a few times.
Yeah.
We might do something different, or we might drop off a possession or two and jump right back in it. we'll just try to throw something different. We might situate the back two people to look like a 1-2-1-1, but we're really in a 1-2-2. We'll just do different things like that. We might jump in a man press. If the 1-2-2 got beat a few times, we'll throw a man. But when I was adjusting those things, we were always trying to find where you were. We might go 1-2-2 trap. Whereas sometimes we would do 1-2-2. It was more of a bait.
Yeah.
So we let you get it in the corner. And then that's where the pressure would come, where we're trying to intercept the long ball. We're trying to intercept, the pass to the middle. But then sometimes we're denying the inbounds, so it just depends like who we're playing, what's it looking like, and we kind of go from there.
So I wanted to pivot. You've got your own ebook, and I wanted to hear kind of the origin stories of how this book came together, and also where someone could go to get this if they were interested in acquiring this book. I know this is something that you try to get in the hands of coaches out there. I want coaches to get this in their hands. Let them know how, and let us know how this book kind of came to life.
Yeah, so it was 2019, and I'm like, getting ready to like just come in from running. This was like after I got done coaching at Winthrop. And so I just like had a heart to help coaches. Like I really love helping coaches. I really love talking about certain things. I was a magnet when I was a coach, so I was always trying to learn. And so, I got in the shower and, I just felt like I heard God say, like, write an ebook on your defense experience. And so I did it. Like, and it probably took me, I don't know, maybe a day or so just to really type it out and design it and all that kind of stuff. It's 26-page, easy read. And so that's how it kind of happened. Based on the contents of the book, that a lot of that happened when I became the acting head coach at Central State. The year before I was acting head coach, I came in as an assistant, and we did very well. And one of the key things that we really focused on was defense. And so that year we earned this, and I always show this off, but this is a championship ring.
Nice.
We went 20-8 that year, and on the inside of the ring it says conference season number 1, which was my first season as a college coach, 6 in steals in the nation. And then we went on a 12-game winning streak. So it's just some things on the inside that kind of was near and dear to our heart that year. But it was pretty awesome because defense was like one of the things. And so that summer when I found out that my head coach wasn't returning, I became the acting head coach. That was just my opportunity to not only build on what was already there, but really introduce like what the defensive side of things for me. So I was able to kind of add on top of that and really start to press on things. So through this ebook, what you'll see is you'll see different pages that have like national stats, like directly from the NCAA site. And one of the first things that I noticed, especially like in D2 and D1, when you go to the NCAA site, there are certain statistics that they track on there. And so at the beginning of that year, I was like, okay, why does the NCAA track certain stats? And so when I went on there, I even found some stats that I never knew they even tracked. Certain turnovers forced, and 3-point field goal defense. Those were things that I was like, I never really, I knew about them, but I didn't know the NCAA kept track of those. So I started doing more study into that. And what I found out was there's certain stats that when you look at those top 5 or 10 teams, more times than none, those are the same teams that end up in the Final Four. And so you look at the Final Four teams, they're somewhere in the top 5 in like steals, rebounds, I want to talk about that a little bit if I get a chance, because offensive rebounds, I call a defensive stat, and I'll tell you why later. But these defensive stats, they were like, they really intrigued me. So what I started to do was I started coaching to be the top in these stats. Like I coached in the way to say, hey, we need to be in the top 5 in turnovers force. We need to be in the top 5 in 3-point field goal defense. We need to be in the top 5 in steals. And so that helped me to start to frame how my practices would be. Because if these teams are like winning their conference, they're in the Final Four, they're going deep in the tournament, and they're in the top 5 or 10 in these stats, then the statistics are telling me everything I need to know. And so you see here where we ended the season 4th in the nation in offensive rebounds. What that did for us is, so offensive rebounds gives you another opportunity to score. But what it did for us was it gave us more opportunities to set our press up.
And what I love again is you're kind of reverse engineering what you want out of your coaching style. Yeah. I would imagine these statistics are a good measure of whether your philosophy is working. Is there any other thing that would kind of let you know your defensive philosophy is working other than these stats that you're looking at and you're wanting to measure against the outcomes that you're producing?
Yeah. So what helped us to know that they're working was the box scores during the game. So the ones you get after every quarter, halftime, these were the stats that we were constantly measuring. So we're looking at how many turnovers were forced after the first quarter at halftime, how many rebounds, how many steals do we have, how many turnovers does the other team have? Like, if we're having a good game, like those numbers are going to be where we're projecting them to be. If we're having a bad game, I can go directly to those numbers because here's the thing, like, and you know this, coach, like these numbers interlock with other numbers. So if I'm forcing turnovers, then I'm having points off of turnovers. There was times that when we played games where our offense was just off, like, you know, we couldn't throw a rock in the ocean. So I was able to put a lineup in that I knew would force turnovers. And they were able to score points for us. So I will look at certain numbers like, okay, our goal would be to force a certain amount of turnovers a game. So if we were on track after halftime, that's like those indicators to say, okay, we're having a good game, we're on track. Or, hey, defense not doing your job, you know, when we start going down that track, and then we get on track with that. So those different things I can look at during the games, that would help.
Yeah, emphasizing creating turnovers and getting steals is kind of magical because it can be your offense then. You take a lot of pressure off your half-court offense if you're able to get out in transition, if you're able to take the ball from the other team, you're able to score off your defense. You talk about a philosophy of, I believe it's nothing is free in your ebook, Coach.
Yeah.
Tell me about kind of instilling that belief with your teams, how you would do that.
Yeah, so, you know, that nothing is free mentality. You know, I used to tell my team that, you know, we're not out here, all the bus trips, all the film sessions, all the practices, and then for the staff, all the staff meetings, all staff meetings, just our regular staff meetings, like all the time we put into this just to get out there and like spectate. So most of the time we were in all out denial. So even when there was like passes, when a point guard comes down and looks to enter the ball in the offense on a wing, if we're just like standing there and just watching them and we can like follow the ball and it gets to the wing and then we're like getting in the defensive stance, to me that's lazy. You know, why are we letting that happen? We have 12 to 15 players that's capable. So if you can't do it, we got somebody who can. So we can't let the other team have a free pass. Like, you know, we're not into that. So I really tried to put that into them. But the key thing was I didn't just expect that of them. Like, I taught them how to do it. So one of the concepts that we would do when we did like half court denials is very similar to offense. If you want your scorers to have shot attempts for them to be able to score. A good game might be a player went 12 for 24. Okay, you applaud them. That's 50%. Well, I knew for us, turnovers and scoring, points off of turnovers was huge. So I had to not only teach my players how to play passing lanes, how to deny, how to duck below the offense, duck below the defense so that we can bait passes and then we can go for them. I had to teach them that. But I also had to allow them to have steal attempts, knowing that they may not get all of them, but I had to allow them to go after, but I had to teach them how. Like, you have to teach your players how not to go and shoot a passing lane, miss the ball, but end up in the locker room. You have to be able to shoot the passing lane. If you don't get it, turn and get right back into play. Those kind of things have to be taught. And so nothing's free. Like, we're not letting no inbounds passes, no long passes, entry passes into the wing, entry passes to the post. Like, any of those things, like, this is not charity. We're trying to win the ball game. So another motto with that is we taught our players, like, we were trying to end the game by halftime. Like, that's just different mentalities we put into people.
Yeah, thinking about kind of playing all-out denial defense, how do you kind of reconcile psychologically just the effects of maybe an opponent burns you for a backdoor cut? How do you prepare your girls when you're coaching them to be able to move beyond that and stick with the game plan, even if they get burnt that way? And you addressed it a little bit earlier, but I'm also interested in, how do you teach this idea of we're going to gamble for steals, we're going to shoot the passing lanes without it getting reckless, where you're constantly getting out of position, compromising your defense, and putting them in disadvantaged situations. So addressing the back door and also how you teach the mentality of going for steals.
Yeah, so the back door, our 3-2, which we played a lot of, it rarely happened on that. But one of the ways we addressed it was in recruiting. So when I recruited athletes, very athletic players that could move and get the spots quickly. So that's one of the ways you address it. Another way you address it is in your preseason. So we did a lot of footwork drills and things like that because, yeah, you'll get burned here or there. But I think that on your defensive rotations, you can make up for that not only with like footwork and athleticism, but talking.
Yeah.
And so we really put an onus on talking. My motto is if you're not talking, you're not playing defense. So you have to talk. And so again, you're not going to get all of them, but on our 3-2, you have that bottom side player that if somebody gets beat, that person should be able to rotate. And if you don't have that strong side bottom, you have that weak side bottom. So we had different things, and if we did get beat, we could adjust, and come for that. What's your second part of that question?
The second part was we were talking about gambling for steals. How do we make sure that doesn't get reckless, where kids are just constantly out in the passing lanes, getting out of position, putting our defense in a compromised spot? I would imagine you have to have some kind of control over that. I at times in my coaching career, I would do something like a red, yellow, green system where we could kind of encourage more steals based on who our opponent was or what we were trying to accomplish at a certain time in a game, where green meant go for steals. We need to come from behind. Yellow was go for it if it's there. And red was we're going to stay compact. We're going to stay as a team defense. If they throw it to you, take it, but we're not going to get ourselves out of position. How do you kind of temper your players so they're not getting reckless in their decision-making, going for steals in the passing lanes?
Yeah, so it may be a unpopular answer, but we didn't have like levels. We were all out denial no matter who we played.
Yeah.
We taught them, like I mentioned earlier, to know how to get back, or to know how to, like, I'll give you an example. the way we recruited and the way we had players, we had like our 1 through 4 and sometimes even our 5 that could play any position in the 3-2. So when you have like your 4 up top, and let's just say, someone gets beat to where that 4 might have to drop from that top and slide in the post, like, and then things get scrambled, and let's say your wing has to float up top now. Well, we taught them all the spots in the 3-2. So if anything were to get out of hand, if all 5 players ended up in 5 different spots, we were good.
Yeah.
And so let's just say you have one of the wings go for a pass, misses it. Well, you have another player that can feel, and then that person that missed the pass can go on the weak side and feel over there if they needed to. So it was a lot of those different kind of rotations that we really worked on, and a lot of the, like, we would do shell drill for like a good hour more if we needed to, and there was practices where if we didn't get it right, we'd be in the shell drill all practice. And for me as a coach, like, I didn't move just because, oh, the practice schedule says we got to go to full court layups now or whatever the case. No, if we don't get this right, if we're not talking, if we're not moving like we need to, then this is what we're going to do today. And I think as coaches, like, you got to stay there. Like, don't get pressured to move just because your paper says it. No, because our defense was our bread and butter. Like, that was our bread and butter more than our offense was. And so, we could score 100 some points. And if we let them score the same, our offense was fine. It's our defense we really wanted to use to shut people down. So, yeah, I think it was just those rotations and being able to teach your players like your different spots. At least the way we ran it, our players they knew all the spots, and so we could cover for one another, feel, and it worked really well for us.
Yeah, so we're aggressively denying the passing lanes. We're going for steals. We're trying to create turnovers. Talk to me how that affects your ball pressure. I'm a big ball pressure guy. I'd imagine you want some ball pressure in your system as well. But I'd imagine there's some kind of balance between pressuring the ball and also containing the ball, because if we're denying passes, there's not a lot of help left after that. So we've got to be making sure that we're containing the ball one-on-one. Talk to me about your philosophy on your ball pressure.
Yeah, so this is where like a lot of the studying for me came in, because if we're scouting the team, and let's just say, and I know, like, I haven't been on Synergy for a while, of course, but back when I had Synergy, 2018, 2019, um, they had different statistics, and you can like click and watch, and like percentage wise where the ball was entering into the offense. So let's just say, I'm playing against your team, and 80% of the time they're trying to enter the ball into the offense going to the left side because that's where your 2 pops out at. So my point guard is going to be instructed to force the PG to go the opposite direction. So when they cross half court, we're pushing everything the opposite direction because we know that you want to go here. And so also for me, I like small guards. So if you look back at the roster I had like 5'4", 5'5", 5'6", and that's very valuable as a point guard, especially a point guard that is tenacious at defense, that can guard the point guard on the other side of the ball and can play lower than that point guard is dribbling. And so I had 2 point guards like that, and that would give them fits. And so that pressure, not only teaching them how to do that, teaching them how to anticipate the dribble to get steals, but also teaching that point guard how to pressure the point guard in such a way to make that point guard turn their back. So now you're starting to cut the vision off. It's harder to see the floor when you got your back turned. But when you got a tenacious type of defender that's sitting lower than you on you, it's very hard to dribble the ball in front of you. And so we had to, in training camp and, preseason, we had to like drill those kind of things in, just those small little details that would help to disrupt the point guard before they're entering the ball into the offense or entering the ball into the high post. So that was like the first part of that. The second part of the ball pressure is now your secondary. So your entry points. You got your wings and you got your high posts. It was connected with our point guard. So I'll give you an example. When I was at Winthrop, we played high point. No, sorry. We played USC Upstate. And USC Upstate had this weird offense where they would enter it about 80% of the time into their high post.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times it would go to the high post to a guard. It was just weird. So anyway, it was my scout, and we really worked on that. So that during those scouts, I actually played that person getting the ball in the high post. And so we were able to disrupt that some because that was their goal. So, when you link the entry points to the ball pressure, like that can be a dangerous tandem because when you cut those entry points off, that's one thing. But when you can stop the point guard or disrupt the point guard before they're even able to get it to the entry points, like a lot of times that's their offense right there. Like you've disrupted it. So we kind of connected the two when we trained them.
Yeah, I love being aggressive at the point of attack. It gets me excited thinking about taking teams out of their offense, disrupting what they want to do, causing chaos, going after them, not conceding any floorboards to them. All that stuff. I love that. I love the reverse engineering of what do we want to accomplish and how are we going to accomplish it as opposed to just a hodgepodge of defenses. I'd like to dig into your 1-2-2 press a little bit here, but while I queue up the film, why don't you tell the audience how they could get their hands on this ebook?
Yes, you can get your hands on the ebook by going to my website, lewisshine.com, LEWISSHINE.com. You can click on store and it's right there for you as well as other resources. But yeah, it's very exciting. I definitely appreciate, talking about this because it's probably one of my greatest passions with the game of basketball. And honestly, a lot of times it just goes so overlooked, I hear a lot of coaches, they major a lot on their offense, which is good. But man, that defensive side of things, it's something really special. And if you can get your hands on some, when I went in the gym, when I went to like UAA in Atlanta, when we're going to like the Run for Roses, like, man, I'm looking for defensive players, because the offense, we can teach the offense. No problem there. But it's hard to go places where you find a player that's passionate about that defensive side. Yeah. You can find one of them, you hit the jackpot. Like, because offense, today it's like, hey, we get the ball, we get excited. But the defensive side, it's not a lot of people excited about that,
Yeah, in my coaching career, I always did defense work early in practice and offense work later in practice, with the thinking being I wanted the players fresh and sharp while we do defense. And everybody can get excited about offense, whether we do it at the beginning of practice or 2 hours into practice. People will be excited to have the ball in their hands and running plays. But defense, I wanted sharp minds and sharp bodies for that. So, Coach, let's pivot into this 1-2-2 press. I've got a video of you kind of drawing it up on the whiteboard, and we'll talk about the defense as you kind of draw. And if there's anything that relates to the video, we can point that out. But why the 1-2-2 full court press? What made it effective for you?
Yeah, so, it really starts with that point person. So naturally, you got your one in the 1-2-2, and you got one person taking the ball out. So it's a natural disruptor. Whether you're, at one place or if you're running the baseline, you got that one person, that one-to-one relationship. And then, with that one-to-one relationship,
your four-man, who would you have your four-man over the ball?
It would be my four-man. Unless we had a lineup in where, we wanted to drop our 4 or 5 back. Let's say we played a bigger team or something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that, then it more likely be our 3. But a lot of times our 4, because the 4s we had, they were like 6'1", 6'2", they were long.
Yeah.
They had long arms. So of course you want to divert that pass and different things like that. So it made it more of an obstacle. And so that point person, a lot of times we're trying to make that point person either deflect that pass somehow, get their hands up, make it hard for that pass to get in, but at the very least, angle where they want that pass to go in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times you may have players that the IQ is not as such where they'll fight that angle. You know, if you come and you like pointing this way, a lot of times the players will go that way. This is strange, you know? And so we'll try to angle that to get into one of those corners. So when we get into that corner, that's where that, like, if we're aggressive, that's where the trap will come. If we're like baiting the aggression, we'll let them kind of get the reverse, and then we'll jump on it.
So we're steering the ball where we want it to go. When we can get it into that deep corner, that provides a lot of opportunities for our defense. We're probably angling our body over top of the ball to steer it into one of those corners, probably the short corner, so we have a shorter trap run to get there. How much did you run trap in that corner versus the bait variation of this press?
We ran trap way more. If we were starting to get beat by it, which, you know, it happened at times, then we may drop to bait, because now you give them a little more space, but then a lot of times it's a little less room for error too. And so let's say like in this situation, we were going more aggressive. So on our aggressive, now this is the tricky part about the way we did it. When we go aggressive, we leave a long pass wide open.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's the part that I love about it. Of course, if you get beat, you hate about it, but if you did it right, it works. So now those two people that, and that's what I'm talking about right here in the video, when those two people converge on that player that gets the ball, they have to know how to use their arms. So their number one goal is to not let a long pass happen, because that's where we would get beat. But a lot of times that first person, it's hard for them to make that pass, but a high IQ player can make it. But if we get our hands up far enough, we're like starting to divert that pass, like the vision of that pass. And so when they're there, this is where our aggression comes. They're trapping there, hands up, making sure no long pass happens. And now we go denial from the weak side wing on the right. They come directly to the inbounder so the ball doesn't go back. And then you have the weak side half court person. They're stopping that center court pass. And then that strong side half court person, they're stopping that pass down the line. And so, as I said before, there's a long pass wide open. There's a person down there by themselves.
Yeah, so when you get that ball into the corner and you lock in a good trap, one of the important things is that you don't foul. When you got your defense in a good position, you want to keep your hands off, keep your hands up. Sometimes I would teach, you're going belly up. You might even cross feet with your trapping partner to keep them locked in that trap. But one of the keys here, you're talking about we're leaving a pass open. Yeah. Well, part of that is dictated by the position of the person with the ball. If that person is like turning their back to the pressure, or they're locked in a good trap, your players off the ball can get more aggressive and they can hunt for steals. Yes. And if that person, if you don't have as much pressure on them just yet, they can kind of sit back and wait and play a little bit more conservative. So it's not like you're just giving a free pass away. You're reading how much pressure do we have on the ball. And if we have good pressure, you might just leave that longest pass all alone, knowing they really can't get the ball out of there unless they make a miracle split out of the trap.
Yes.
So, Coach, are we getting into kind of the second line of the defense here in the video? Talk to me about the rotations behind this. We've got the ball in the corner. We've got a trap. How would our weak side player in the press, that second line, what would they be thinking in terms of rotating to cover the inbounder or rotating to cover the middle? Talk to me about your philosophy there.
Yeah, so I'm talking about here like a basic press breaker that a lot of teams kind of run. So we kind of go through like some of sets that we might expect and how we're going to rotate. So this is like a basic one where, you know, a lot of times you have the inbounder, they're going to drop to receive that return pass. So our weak side player in that 1-2-2 has to come and get that return pass. You cannot let that happen. That's their job. Now, it's very risky, okay? But like I said before, we train for this. You know, the conditioning, you have to be moving out there and not getting tired either. So that weak side person, their job is to get that inbounder for that return pass. A lot of times you're going to have that weak side offensive player that's going to dive to the middle. Well, that's when that weak side half court player has to take that out.
Yeah.
So that weak side half court, the middle is all theirs.
Your philosophy here is you're rotating to take away that return pass to the inbounder.
Yeah.
And at a minimum, what you're doing is you're forcing tempo in the game. You're forcing the team, your opponent, to advance the ball up the court as opposed to reversing the ball. You don't want to sit there and have your defense be shifting from side to side while they reverse the ball freely.
No.
So you're forcing them to pass the ball up the court. You're covering the middle with one of your backline players, and then your other backline player would probably be responsible for rotating back. I don't have a ton of experience with the 1-2-2 press. I've always used more of a diamond situationally, which it's more defined based on who's in the middle and who's in the back. Does that change in a 1-2-2 based on your personnel, based on which side they're inbounding? Because I'd imagine you'd want probably one specific player to be rotating back towards the basket, or was it just depending on how the press break played out, who was rotating to protect the basket?
Yeah, so it depends on how it will play out. Like we were athletic, so we were not so afraid of that long pass. It rarely happened just because of how we ran it. But you would have so how I'm talking here, like how this would play out. Let's just say the pass came to the middle. If that pass came to the middle, then it's all hands on deck getting back. So because you already have my weak side player going to the middle. So if the middle gets the ball, then you would have the opposite half court person that would drop back, or vice versa, depending on which side the press started, what corner you have, the trap in. It would always be that available half court person. So if the ball went to the middle, pretty much your press is off. You're not, you know, if they catch that pass, we're dropping.
Yeah.
And you're going to have one of the half court people that's not, whatever half court person is not crashing that middle trying to get that pass, they're back. You know, so that's kind of how we work that. Of course, at times we got beat by that, but we were top 5 in the nation in turnovers forced, and this was one of the main proponents of doing that, just because of the unorthodox style that we kind of ran, and we had our own rules when it came to it, and different things like that.
Talk to me about the amount of depth you think is necessary to run a system like this, where you're, constantly pressing. Obviously, there's, physical fatigue that comes with doing this. You're trying to get your players in shape so that they can do it, even though it is a physically demanding style. And obviously, you might get into some foul situations just being aggressive. How many players did you think it was necessary to run a system like this effectively in a rotation?
So we had 15 players on the team. So all 15 were ready to go at any time, and were conditioned enough to be able to run this. That's the short answer of it. But we had players at every position. We had different lineups as well. So we had our strong offensive lineups where we knew we can get some things going, 3-point shooting lineup. But like I said before, there were times where we knew that, okay, offense is not doing good. We knew that we had a defensive lineup that we could throw in that could really cause havoc. One of our kids, which was our 3, which she ran a lot of the top. She was 15th in the nation in steals. just alone her.
Yeah.
And the tenacity at which you could see her going after basketballs, deflections, swiping at balls, going over, like it was just a different type of hunger. And we taught all 15 that. And so, of course, you have some that are better than others, but I would say for whatever you have on your roster, you need to prepare like everybody is going to be playing on any given night. Because if three of my starters go down with foul trouble, injury, or whatnot, we can't like flush the season down the toilet because our first few players were not on there. So we trained everybody like strongly. And honestly, in the recruiting, you got to look at that as well. It's not about just the best offensive player. Man, we got to look at everybody for defense. And if defense is all we had, that's all we got.
Yeah. Tell me an interesting scheme a team used against you to break this press. I know commonly a lot of teams might streak their inbounder into the middle. They might enter the ball and have some kind of cutting sequence where they're going sideline and middle. Was there any interesting approaches that proved to be effective in breaking this press?
Yeah, so like one is funny to believe, but one of the things, if you drop all your players back,
Yeah.
sometimes players are just like send everybody back,
Stretch.
versus
You're stretching your press out wide. Yeah.
exactly like it's weird, but one of the worst things that you can do against a 1-2-2 is set up a press breaker.
Yeah.
It's weird, but it is probably one of the worst things you can do. If you know what I mean,
Yeah. I mean, conventional wisdom is like if you're struggling with the press, a lot of coaches think, well, we're going to bring more people up. We're going to have, a 4-up press breaker. And all that means is everybody has less space. So I think about this in some different ways. My press break philosophy has always been kind of a 2-up press break philosophy. Then I had guys at half court where I could flash them up if we needed them or rotate them back to the basket.
Yeah.
But there's definitely problems in going to like a 4-up press breaker where you're very much congesting the space. You're shortening the rotations to run the passing lanes. And one of the biggest problems that coaches really don't understand with the press breakers is when you bring everybody up, that means you have to work someone back to the basket to punish the press. And if you're pressing me and I advance the ball to half court and then have to set up something and run offense against your 3-2, you had a free chance to press me and I didn't make you pay. I just had to play against your half court defense. If you press me and I beat it for a layup, that's a whole different thing. So you want to have somebody back as a finisher to punish that press. And the more people you bring up, it's harder to have people back to punish it. And you're really confining the space there. So that is an interesting philosophy. And teams coming at you where they put maybe two finishers back, and now that's really stretching out that back line of your zone. Coach, last question here on your 1-2-2 press. I wanted to get into this kind of conversion tactics. So you're done pressing. Either the team has hit middle or they've worked the ball up the court. Talk to me about your philosophy and how you're converting to half-court defense. It looks like primarily you were converting into a 3-2 zone.
Yeah, so, especially in college, we're dealing with 18 to 22-year-olds. There's so much already going on. You got classes, you got all these different offenses. We had like a 5-point type of offense where, we had like our 5-out series. We have, our horn series. We got our read and react series. We got all those different things. So you have so much that the players are already doing. Like if you could find something effective and make it simple to where they can understand it and they don't have to do so much thinking as focusing on their assignment.
Yeah.
That's what we tried to do in this. So the 1-2-2 was already like effective. So it's like, okay, if that was effective in a full court, how can we make that effective in a half court setting? And the thing that mirrored the 1-2-2 the most was the 3-2. And the beautiful part about it was players could drop back into those same positions and we didn't have to change personnel. So if you point person on 1-2-2, what makes it to where you can't be point person on 3-2? It's the same type of position. Some of the movements are the same. Some of the concepts are the same, except for like, of course, you got your post areas and all that once you slide back. So which those aren't in the full court, but there's a lot of similar concepts. So to make it easy on them, it's like, hey, when we call out assignments or we on the whiteboard before, jump ball, it's like point person, this person, left, right, whatever the case, and your position going down the court because it's the same thing. Now they can focus on the concepts and the different movements and the strategies that we were trying to move in it, because pretty much they knew where they were. One of the things that helped with that is because I didn't want like players, and this may sound kind of counteractive, but I tried to give players a lot of freedom. I didn't want them to be robots. So me telling my point person that's where you are when you go down court, it's not so much being a robot. It's really freeing them to think about other things like shooting passing lanes, different things like that. And the concept of why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to get that basketball. So, and then to back that up, it's teaching them the different spots. So if you get out of line, you're able to pop in the empty spot because you have to feel for someone and they know it. So, but the concept is 1-2-2 to 3-2. That's the simple part of it.
Yeah, so this makes for a good transition of our talk here, where we're looking at this defensive system matrix that we talked about earlier. And what you're talking about is, you had a 1-2-2 full court press defense, and basically the same kind of defense drops down into a quarter court 3-2 zone, where you're able to kind of use the same concepts, apply them at a different pickup point. And that kind of leads us into a conversation about this Jay Wright Villanova tempo press, where, again, we could use the same kind of principles in a 3/4 court pickup or a half court pickup. And basically, we've installed maybe one defense with some tweaks, and we're able to apply it in a full court setting, a 3/4 court setting, maybe a half court trap, and maybe back into a 1-2-2 or a 3-2 zone. Do you remember watching these Jay Wright teams with this tempo control 1-2-2 press?
Man, they did this really well, man.
Yeah, they did this well, and it's a little different philosophy than what you took on your full court press system. They weren't quite as aggressive, but one of the neat things about it is they would throw it out and they could make it look like it was this passive thing that was just rolling back, and then they could choose their spots to become more aggressive. Or if the offense did them a favor and positioned poorly, spaced poorly, they could lock on some traps there. So it doesn't hurt to have future pros, multiple future pros, DiVincenzo, Brunson, Bridges, Hart, all of those guys in the system. They're going to make a press really work. But this is kind of a similar philosophy to what you laid out in the full court, but it's designed more for tempo control and less about being aggressive and going for steals.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, stand out to you and just watching some of these initial clips?
Yeah, so there was I think it might have been one of those third clips. Let's see if they do it here. So coming across half court, a lot of times they were getting that trap in that corner, and there was one of the clips that you showed that the pass to like the 3-point line and then the pass back across to like the mid half court, those guys converged on it and prevented that pass from going either of those directions. So now you're trapped. You can't get the next pass to the left or right. So you got like the middle and you got the basket.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of times, based on how you're trapping, those passes that are open to you are the hardest ones to make. So,
if you watch the film closely, you'll see the active hands. You'll see how they kind of lock in the traps. You'll see with the rotations, a lot of times they are a little more laid back in their rotations out of their traps until they really sense that they have kind of like a blood in the water moment.
Yes.
They'll rotate back. So do you see the kind of similar rotations here, or you can definitely tell that they're a lot more passive? To me, these are more passive rotations off the ball than what you had described with your full court press.
Yeah, they're like a little more like let's see what they do on this one. So they're kind of like waiting and baiting. So it's like the person dribbling the ball, the only way they can really go is backwards. If they go forward, they're going to come right into the trap.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like they're baiting, they're there, but it's like, okay, that trap is coming regardless. And yeah, it's kind of like a little more laid back. I tended to not allow the pass to rotate the floor. Like if it goes to the right, it should not go back around to the other side. It should not happen, you know. And that's not to say it didn't happen, because of course, the course of a game, it's going to happen. But we caused a lot of turnovers, when they tried to get it back. Like on this one, like that's danger, and a lot of, honestly, a lot of the times the players, they can't handle that trap. I've had it to where, coaches had to make subs because the trap was just too much for the guard. Like, you have to, and if a coach is not ready for that, like in our conference, like other teams knew what it was. They knew. So my philosophy was, I want to win the game before the game starts. Meaning that coach has to think about how he's going to deal with this before the game happens. So much so, he may not have time to think about his offense, because he got to think about how he's going to beat this defense.
Yeah,
and that's how we tried to come with that type of pressure. And we didn't let up. It wasn't letting up. Like, we're trying to push it to 40, 50, like but that sends a message to the teams that's coming.
Yeah, there's definitely a tempo control element to what we're watching now, and that works in kind of two different ways. One is, we've got a 10-second shot clock to cross the ball over half court.
Yeah.
So while they're not attacking aggressively, they're kind of dictating that you reverse the ball and scan around the court, and teams are kind of under the gun on when they're going to cross half court. And that can create some opportunities for the defense. You see them kind of stunting at the ball, trying to get them to pick it up, trying to make them unsure. So if you're up against that 10-second clock, sometimes you have to cross half court even when you don't want to, and that can put you into some tricky situations where you're walking across right into a trap. And the second tempo element of this is, as after the ball crosses half court, commonly they are converting into a man-to-man defense or a 3-2 defense. So you've eaten the clock to even cross half court. Then you've got to figure out what they're in and decide how you want to attack it. And that's if you don't just attack it, as a scramble defense. So a lot of coaches are a lot more comfortable when they want to run their stuff. They don't want their players just going out there and playing. They, let's get into our Princeton. Let's get into our dribble drive. Yeah. This kind of disrupts that process with this conversion, where teams are kind of picking, do we want to attack the press as we cross half court, or do we want to bring it back out in setup? Coach, any kind of final thoughts just from looking at this tempo control version of the 1-2-2 and even maybe how it relates to your full court version of the 1-2-2?
Yeah, so like if I was coaching today, like I'd watch more of this, because you're going to get teams that are going to get a little smarter, figure out some things. And this could kind of be a way to disguise what you're really trying to do in the overall scheme. This right here still gets the job done in some ways, and there may be teams that you can, because this slows the offense, to begin with, getting into the offense rather. But then it's going to speed up the offense, because like you said, by the time you get over half court, that's 10 seconds less. And then now you have to fight to enter the ball. You're not even in your offense yet. And a lot of times we would get turnovers like in these kind of situations off of just, they're trying to make passes and going off of people's hands and fingers. It's like, it's so much chaos going on. So that's the unforced turnovers. But I like what they're doing here. I mean, it's a really, really nice scheme. It can create a lot of havoc, and it can create a lot of errors. The offense just errors because they're trying to figure things out, and it's outside of probably what they went over in scouting, in their scout,
Yeah, this fits a little bit outside of what I would consider your personality in coaching, where you're really trying to dictate the action. You're really trying to force the action. This is a little bit more passive, and you're kind of waiting back. You're allowing the opponent to make mistakes. But the real interesting thing here, and why I wanted to have this conversation, was the opportunity to kind of explore, we have a 1-2-2 defense. We can play it at full court. We could play it at three-quarter court. We could play it as a half-court trap. We could play it in the quarter court. And maybe even within those various pickup points, you have some different calls that you could make as a coach that would dictate whether you're going to be more aggressive with how you play it or more passive. So we've looked at those kind of two systems of full court press with an aggressive rotation, a three-quarter court press with a more conservative rotation behind it. And you can kind of do all of those things out of one defense, varying the pickup points and varying how aggressive you rotate out of it. Does that sound like an interesting defensive scheme that somebody could build, Coach?
It really is. If you're out there and you're listening and you're trying to figure out like next year, maybe you didn't make it to the tournament, maybe you didn't make it to the conference championship game or whatever. Like if you were to try this kind of scheme, I can guarantee you it could turn like your outlook on next year around because I did a study one time and defensively, if you focus on the certain stats that we went over, stats that are in my ebook or whatnot, things that we talked about, like you put yourself in the top 30% of the winning margin. Because when they say defense wins championship, there is some truth to that. And not only just defense, but if you attack with your defense, if you aim to use your defense to really disrupt what the other team is doing, and you practice like that, you train your players with that mindset, you show them things that emulate what you're trying to teach, like Kobe Bryant clips, Michael Jordan clips, Dennis Rodman, those kind of things. They have to see that so they can now adopt that mindset of disruption. We're completely trying to annihilate their offense, disrupt them, make them not want to play us again. Like that's how you have to attack this type of defense, like that what we did. If you're looking for a scheme, that's like a simple scheme to implement. Of course, it has its layers, but it's a simple scheme to implement because you're looking at, one press, one half court set. It's structured the same. We would break out of that and go to man and things like that. But when we went to that, it was structured the same. Of course, with levels, you can have your own rules and different things to it. But I think this is something that, a team could build a defense on.
Yeah, Coach, in your ebook, I found something that I thought was kind of interesting, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to kind of expand on it. But you have kind of an interesting take on rebounding and how that connects to defense. So tell me kind of why you believe that your press actually starts with your rebounding.
Yeah, so if you think about like we're on offense and, our press was like a bread and butter. It's the thing that when you look at those top 10, top 5 stats that we had, a lot of it, a majority of those stats were encompassed from our press. So we wanted to be able to set up our press more. So imagine like a up and down game. You're shooting shots, you're missing them, 1 and outs. You got a lot of those. And your players, it puts pressure on your players because they got to hit like every shot for you to set up your press, more. So now it's like, okay, not only how can we get more opportunities to score, but having the understanding in mind that the more we take advantage of offensive rebounding and getting points off of offensive rebounds, the more opportunities we're going to have to set up our press. So now offensive rebound is important now. And that's where I link it. And I call it a defensive stat. So after our defensive drill, which was the very first drill in practice, the very second drill in practice was a offensive rebounding drill. Because we knew we were trying to funnel and drive everything to defense. So that's why I say offensive rebounding is a defensive stat, because the more offensive rebounds you get, the more putbacks and scores we'll get off the offensive rebounds. We call them O boards. The more or boards and putbacks we get, the more times we can set up our press. So that's how we linked it.
Yeah. So, given your philosophy, I'm interested to hear how many players were you comfortable sending to the offensive boards, and how do you kind of teach rebounding differently based on your belief in rebounding being connected to your defense and your pressing?
Yeah. So we sent 4 to the glass, and I was comfortable with that because we had athletes, so we were not so concerned about getting beat off of that and a team going back and we got 4 in the glass and we're getting beat on the fast break. When we studied a lot of teams, normally, unless you come against like a really elite team that's really great at like defensive rebounding, you see about 3 players that are probably just spectating when the ball goes up. And maybe you have 2 players that are trying to fight for the rebound, or they're going after it. So and it's notorious in the game today. It's like, wow. So I really studied that. I studied teams in our conference, and I'm like, okay, we're going to send 4 because we're trying to make sure we get that rebound. One of the biggest things that we implemented, especially in our individual workouts, was anticipation. So what we would do is we would couple guards in individual workouts with bigs. And sometimes I would have the bigs come in, our main rebounders, and all they would do is anticipate how the ball was coming off the rim with certain shooters. So you could know if I had my 2 guard, her name was Brooke, the way she shoots and how she shoots, a lot of times her shots would come off back rim. So if you start to get to know that, then as you're anticipating when the ball goes up, you can almost you can train a player to watch the trajectory of the ball and move into the place where the ball is going to be before the ball even hits the rim. And I also tied that in because Dennis Rodman used to do that a lot. And there's actually a clip out there of Dennis Rodman actually talking about it. So when I got a hold of that kind of stuff, he's arguably the best rebounder of all time. Why wouldn't I show my team that? You know what I mean? And so that's what we studied, those kind of things, like literal Dennis Rodman film with our bigs, with our 3s, 4s, and 5s especially. And so we implemented that into what we did. And so if you go back and watch some of those film, you can see our players moving in the spaces when the ball went up. Of course, the box out for sure, but we also, the last part of that is we didn't teach just box out and you just stay in the box out position. No, we taught box out and release. So yeah, you might have that box out position, touching the player, but the moment you see that ball maybe going somewhere that you're not, you can release and go to that spot. And so that's how we were able, through anticipation, we got a lot of we got a lot of rebounds off of that anticipation. But that had to be drilled and drilled and drilled. And like I say, we start our second drill was a rebounding drill because I believe whatever's most important to you, you got to put that as those top 2-3 drills because that's the most important. And we did that, and we were 4th in the nation in offensive rebounds.
Yeah, in my coaching career, I've done 3 to the glass with kind of a halfback, fullback approach where we had one player kind of hanging around the 3-point line if a long rebound came and another getting all the way back. I've done a lot of crashing the glass with 4 players. I truly believe, especially in high school basketball, the offensive rebounding is just such an opportunity that a lot of coaches don't take full advantage of. The idea that you can just get extra possessions, and a lot of it is just an effort thing. My full philosophy is we want 3 to the glass or we want 4 to the glass, depending on what we're doing that season. but I need you to be doing something. Like you're either rotating back or you're going to get us an offensive rebound. We're not just kind of standing around and watching. Like be contributing to our rebounding or sometimes there's situations that are unclear. Should I go for this rebound? I don't want to leave too much, our backcourt wide open. I understand sometimes there's things that are unclear, but you can't just freeze and do nothing, which a lot of players do. You're either got to be going to the glass or you've got to be rotating back. And it's kind of the biggest threat against transition offense, which kind of sounds counterintuitive. It's like, oh, you're crashing 4 and the other teams wants to run. Oh, good luck if they get the rebound. They're going to be just out in those lanes and they're going to be running the ball. And they might, but they've got to get the rebound first before they can run with it. So if you crash hard, it can really cause some transition offensive teams to be a little bit more mild in their approach because they know they have to commit to a team defensive rebounding to get the ball. So like if I was playing against a team that had heavy transition, I might do something like that Jay Wright, Villanova, tempo press, trying to slow them down. But I think the number one thing would be we're going to crash the glass really hard. And if you're not going to commit all 5 bodies to rebounding, we're going to feast on offensive boards. So, Coach, I wanted to transition. We promised the viewers here some drills. So let's end our session here today with some defensive drills. And I wanted to start with this video of yours. This is a full court defensive conditioning drill. So just talk to me about what we're seeing and what you see as the purpose of this drill.
Okay, so this is a team I went in and worked with. So this drill, this was like we were open practice with this sometimes. So
this seems like a great warm-up drill.
Yeah, great warm-up. First thing in practice, like center break, we go into this drill. So you got full court, which is gives you conditioning. You got like a closeout, and then you got a slide to the side. Now, this is not like getting into like the details of defense. I've even had people challenge me on like social media, like this is not a defense drill, but for us in our minds and what we were trying to implement in our players, it was a fast-paced drill with defensive movements, and that helped us to get into their minds what we were trying to do. So, of course, at different times we had, the closeout had to be tight. This is a team that I went and worked with that I had never worked with them before. So like we're drilling them on these different things. Whereas if you would have saw my team, the closeout were pristine, the slides were low, form and all of that thing, you have to work those things into it. But this was just one of those first ones that, hey, we will break out that maybe a couple times a week. We had some other ones that we did. But it was the defensive minded that, hey, no balls, defensive minded conditioning. Let's get it fast paced. Let's get to our rebounding drill. So that's what this was for.
Yeah, I love exactly what you said there, which is like I wouldn't consider this like a foundational defensive drill of how we're going to build our defensive system. But if I was a defensive coach and wanted our players to have a defensive mindset, there's lots of different ways to warm up. If I wanted a defensive mindset, this could fit right into it. And I firmly believe I've always done for my coaching career, first 15 minutes of practice is non-contact. We might do shooting. We might do fundamentals. We might do some different things. But we're not beating on each other until our bodies are kind of warmed up. And I think that a warm-up drill like that, if we really wanted a defensive mentality, could fit into something like that. So I have a drill – a video that shows kind of the drills that I believe in the most in terms of team defense. So I'm trying to get that pulled up now. So these are all kind of short clips of different drills that I've used. And I'd like to just go through them with you real quickly and talk about them before we get off here tonight. So
for sure,
I'll get that queued up. The first one is going to be a shell defense drill. And I'm a big shell defense guy. I've taken, like you sound like you've taken some arrows over your defensive warm-up drill. I've taken some arrows over my stance on shell defense. And when I first actually started coaching, I would do shell defense for about 35 to 45 minutes a day, every single day. And that was excessive. I figured out how to use it more as a tool as my coaching career went on, instead of just this is our 45 minutes, we're going to do it. We had a really good defense, but it was very monotonous in how we approached it. But I believe in shell defense in terms of progression. A lot of coaches just see it as it's the base phase of we're going to pass the ball around the perimeter and we're going to talk and move into our positions. I don't see it that way. I see it as progressing into handling dribble penetration, handling off-ball cutting, handling screens. I feel like it's an all-encompassing kind of drill that can really be the foundation of a team defense. And frankly, I've said this before, I don't really understand how coaches build a team defense without some form of shell drill. Tell me your kind of stance here on what you think of shell drill. I know that you'd mentioned that you'd used it before. What we're looking at here on the screen is what I would consider our warm-up phase to shell drill, where we're really just working on closeouts, contesting, creeping up into the ball, applying ball pressure, defending a first step. So I wouldn't even consider this phase 1. I would consider this like phase 0 of shell drill. But talk to me about your stance on shell drill.
Yeah, I got a couple videos out there on shell drill. Shell drill is one of the most important phases of your defense. There's a lot of layers to it. So you got your perimeter, of course, but then you got your weak side movement, which I think is one of the most important parts of your shell drill. Like, and that constitutes like talking, like that back person, that weak side back person is like the most important person on the whole floor because they can see everybody and everything, so like being able to teach those people how to talk. You have your backs, your weak side person that can intercept passes. Like you got those different layers you have to talk through. You have like your coverages on the weak side in case the strong side gets beat. Who's moving, who's rotating, who's filling. Like there's so many different like layers to it. And that's why I know for us and I know for you, coach, like we spend a lot of time on it. And that's one of the ones I said before. We're not moving from this until we get it. So if we got to stay here all practice, we got to do it. But there's just so many layers, and you have to really sit and talk through it and get the players to understand what their assignments are. The person that's on the ball, what is your assignment? Don't get beat. Where are we turning the player? Like, are you trying to interrupt their flow of dribbling the ball? Like if they pick the ball up, where your hands at? Like just all kinds of stuff. And then you got your next players. You have your weak side players. It's a lot of different things to that. So it's important. I'm right with you.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in shell drill. I'm also a big believer in doing charge drills in practice, which I've also taken some social media arrows. Before we get into charge drill, let's hit some of these comments. We got Coach Wilson, great stream, defense wins championships. We both agree with that here. Coach Eric, pool work, good tip. That must have been earlier in the show. Coach Eric, I applaud you for doing the show, pool work there. Coach Shine, hope all is well, my guy. You got some of your fans watching in here. But let's tackle this kind of take the charge drill. I'm a big believer in, the charge as a huge momentum play where it's a personal foul on whoever it runs over your player. It's a team foul. It can negate a bucket if they threw the ball in while they were charging over top of you. It kind of sets us, there's a psychological effect where if teams know that you'll take charges, they might not drive as aggressively. And I think for your players to really teach them, if you just talk about charges, you may have a couple guys on your team that'll take them. But if you're actually practicing physically taking the contact, I believe that you can get almost your whole team bought in. I've always had a guy or two on each team that would kind of sidestep them until we rode them hard enough in practice where they just felt like they had to start taking them. But I think that these reps in practice where they're learning how to take charges and they're learning how to do them safely, it builds confidence in them where they can translate that into the game. What say you on a charge drill, Coach? Yay or nay?
I say yay. I mean, when I came up playing, it was a no-brainer. Like you had to do them.
Yeah, it wasn't an option.
It was the charge drills, and it was the ones you rolled out the ball and had to go dive at the ball. Like those kind of drills, like were like
Yeah.
Unanimously, like, coach, you doing them, period.
Oh, those are
And
good to ban these days. We better not be doing those drills
yeah,
these days.
you can't do that today. You might get fired. But those drills were like, those kind of drills are like the bread and butter. Like those are your camaraderie drills. Like, you get your team hype. But here's the thing, like with those kind of drills and like the offensive rebounding drills, like when those things happen in the game, when you get like an offensive rebound put back or you take a charge, it's like it takes the wind out of the other team. Like
Yeah.
it's like it takes the momentum out of it. And then the players are looking at the coach mad. They're phenomenal plays.
Yeah, I know we're talking about charges now, but we had a thing that was called got ones, and it was for offensive rebounding.
Yeah.
And basically, when anybody got an offensive rebound, everybody on the bench would yell, "Got one!" And it was like our team celebrating somebody sacrificing by making an extra effort to go get our team an extra possession. But charges, I'm a big believer in them. I haven't had anybody get seriously injured taking charges. I do think that there is kind of a cost of doing business where you've got to take some contact, but doing it safely and learning to take them safely helps there not be injury from charges, where you're teaching kids when you take the charge, you're going to yell to draw the attention of the official, but you're also going to tuck your chin to your chest so your head's not bouncing back. You're not going to lay your hands out so that you brace yourself with your wrists and break your wrists. You're going to keep your hands out in front of you. So I think that there's safer ways to take them, and if you practice them, that's going to put you in a position to take them and also take them and not get injured. So we'll move on here. We've got the next drill. This is what I call Kufis rebounding. I was coaching at Glen Oak High School, where CJ McCollum and Costa Kufis both played their high school basketball, and we like to name our drills after our alumni, just to kind of make a legacy connection. And we didn't just do the professional players that came from our school. We would do all kinds of players, but we named this rebounding drill after Costa, who was a really good supportive alumni of our program. But basically all we're doing is, this is a 5-on-4 drill where one person on the perimeter is going to volunteer that they're not crashing. So the defense has the inside position. They have 5 players, and all they've got to do is keep 4 players from getting the offensive rebound. The offensive rebound. Whoever doesn't get the rebound has to run a full court sprint in 11 seconds. And what this is kind of training here is you've got these opportunities to kind of crack down on a second person. So when you have recognition that your player isn't crashing, and most teams don't crash all 5, they might crash 4, like if they're coaching against us, but most people don't crash all 5. So you can have a numbers advantage. If you're rebounding with 5, then you have these situations where you can kind of crack down and you can get a second block out on a person. But we're really just teaching toughness, physicality, getting a body on people. And for offensive rebounding, we would be teaching some of the techniques of using a swim move, wedging a guy underneath the rim so you can create a position where the ball might bounce out to you, things like that. What do you think about this as a team rebounding drill, Coach?
I think it's wonderful because it has different things within it. It's your conditioning in there, your rebounding. It's making you feel it if you don't come out on top. Like it has these different components that mentally, I think that the best training a lot of times is mental training. And so I think that has some of the different elements in there, while at the same time, talking about the goal, which is rebounding. So I like drills that have different components in it.
Yeah, this was probably my go-to kind of team rebounding. The next one would be what I call lanes progression. And it's a progression because it starts with the zigzag drill. We're hitting all the taboo subjects right now because a lot of coaches will tell you you can't do a zigzag drill. But this is kind of a progression that works out from doing technique slides like a lot of coaches do at even the lowest grades of basketball, and works it into one-on-one full court and also kind of 2-on-1 full court situations where an offense is working on keeping the ball safe against 2 defenders and still trying to attack the edges while the defense is working on trapping. But right now we're looking at one-on-one full court, and the idea is the players aren't allowed to stop. So they're not allowed to use change of pace. they can only use change of direction. And what we're really trying to work
Mm-hmm.
on is with our defenders, they're able to sprint to get back in front of the ball, and they can turn that defender as they get going on and on a full speed dribble. So, Coach, any thoughts on the zigzag drill or one-on-one full court?
Yeah, I like the fact of teaching the players to sprint to try to get back and turn. I mean, I've seen a lot of different, things happen off of that kind of thing. We teach our players that too. Like, you get beat, you got to be in an all-out sprint. Like, there is like a non-negotiable. You got to turn and sprint. It takes a lot of discipline, of course. You see players today just kind of like give up on stuff like that. But if you can get a turn is very valuable. Yeah, when you turn a player, that's that second tier of that, and that's what I like.
Yeah, I love full court one-on-one. I love it as a conditioning drill. It's one of my favorite drills for conditioning. But I also love the element of defense where there's nowhere to hide. You've got all this space, and you've got to move your feet to stay in front of somebody. And if you don't, you've got to sprint, work your butt off to get back in front of them. And I really like it from an offensive standpoint too, where you're really working on your ball handling. So I think the one-on-one full court, one of my favorite drills. Coach, that's going to be it for the drills. We got to cover quite a few here, starting with your warm-up drill. I've really enjoyed our time together, and I always love a defensive-focused live stream. Any kind of closing thoughts for us before we wrap this one, Coach?
Yeah, I just say that again, if you're a coach looking for like a defensive scheme, like of course, the 1-2-2-3-2 I like. There are some others, but like whatever you do choose, like commit to it. Commit to being the best on the planet at it. Find whoever out there is doing the scheme that you're using and learn everything from them, and then remix it. You know, make it your own. Do things that they're not doing. Add things that they don't have. Um, and then I would say too, like especially if you're in college, because I know, well, even high school, because they keep real good track of stats now. Like I know Huddle does a really great job now, because I was helping some players and I was looking at their stats on there. So like I was able to really track their stats really good on there. But of course, like Synergy and then just the regular team sites in college, you can really, in the NCAA, especially in college, you can really look up stats and really, I mean, have a field day just studying stats, because stats will tell you more about a player than watching film about a player. And that's just my opinion. Like the stats tell you what they did or what they're doing, like, and then watching them on film is just kind of like the ancillary. Like that's just the topping of it. But
Yeah.
that'll help you understand more. But the stats is telling you everything. And so if you only had the stats, you can do a lot with that in terms of like forming your defense to be the top in your conference, forming your defense to be the top in the country. Those stats is where it's at. And that's why I aimed at the stats. And that's why I put those things in my ebook, because they mean a lot. And I went to those stats. I tried to figure out why the NCAA would use them and track them. Like, I'm the NCAA. Why would I track 3-point field goal defense? Why? There's a reason, and that's a reason why certain teams you see up in the top in those areas are in the Elite Eight, NCAA D2, D3. They you will see if you go back and I'll say this, man, because this, we can go for 5 hours doing this, but one of the times I went back like 10, 15 years and looked at all of the national champions in D2, D1, but then D2, because I was in D2. And I took those teams and I started looking at each of those categories. Like, okay, they won a national championship. Where were they in rebounds? Where were they in steals? And almost every time those teams were up there in the top 10 in all those categories. And so it made me like, okay, if they're doing it and they're in these situations, almost winning championships, then why am I not doing it? So that's all I'll say with that, is just really like study those stats, because they'll help you a lot. I would love to connect with anybody who wants to talk defense, who might need some consulting in that area. I go in and work with teams all over, consult with teams even virtually. So we'd love to connect with anybody that wants to, consult in that way. But other than that, I'm just grateful that you would have me on, man. I appreciate this.
I enjoyed our conversation. I found it interesting because we're completely opposite ends of the spectrum on our risk tolerance. We both love defense. You like it with a lot more risk. You seem to be a kind of an adrenaline junkie kind of guy with it. But we both love defense. I thought we had a great conversation. I would encourage anybody out there, go to Coach Shine's website, pick up that defensive guide that we talk through, go to his YouTube channel where he drops basketball knowledge, but he also has some other elements to him. You're kind of a Renaissance man in terms of doing a lot of different things and being able to help a lot of different people. But Coach, we're going to wrap there. I enjoyed our time together. I'm glad we got to connect face to face here, and I look forward to connecting with you some more in the future.
Hey, look forward to staying connected. Thank you guys so much.
All right, Coach. Have a great night.
You too.